Eftel was a middle-aged mage who spent almost 40 years studying lightning magic to help defeat the demon lord alongside the other great heroes. Usually, this would be the moment when he gets shunned and betrayed for being the weakest member of the hero party. But this time, the people of the kingdom are genuinely grateful for his help. When the king thanks them for their efforts in stopping the demon invasion, he announces their rewards. As a reward for their bravery, the king declares that he will grant them the greatest title anyone in the kingdom can receive, the title of emperor. Eftel is shocked to hear this. The title of emperor is usually reserved for nobles and is extremely rare. Being given such a title is truly a great honor for him. After crowning the water, fire, and earth heroes as emperors, the king turns to Eftel. He acknowledges that while Eftel may not be the strongest mage, everyone knows that the hero party could not have triumphed without his help. So Eftel will also receive the title of emperor. He feels happier than ever because this moment makes all his sacrifices during training worthwhile. Years pass, and Eftel is now a retired old man living in the countryside. He spends most of his days training the young children he has taken in over the years. During today's lesson, Eftel has the kids practice their magic formations while balancing rocks on their heads to help them maintain focus. A few kids struggle at first, but they all manage to get it after a while. Once Eftel is satisfied, he tells them they can finally take a break. The kids are exhausted, and Eftel praises their hard work. However, he then mentions he wants to see them practice the level 4 magic he taught last week. Just as he finishes speaking, Merlin asks him if he's sure he wants to keep going without taking a break for himself first. Eftel can see she is genuinely worried about him since he's getting old, but he reassures her that he can still bend his knees without sounding like bubble wrap, so standing a little won't tire him out. He remembers the day he found Merlin. She was the daughter of a demon woman caught up in one of his battles. Despite her being a demon, he decided to take her in because she wouldn't survive on her own. Though she is likely too young to remember, Eftel feels guilty, knowing he must have killed many of her family members during the war when she looks at him with such sincere concern. For now, Eftel decides to continue with the lesson and tells everyone to prepare to review the level 4 spells again. But Merlin interrupts and asks if he could teach them some level 6 magic today. The other kids are puzzled why she would want to learn level 6 magic when they just covered level 5 yesterday. Eftel is a bit confused too, having not expected that. He sees Merlin's eagerness but tells her there's no need to rush. She will learn level 6 magic in time. For now, he wants her to keep practicing the basics because they are crucial. Merlin feels disappointed at this since she wants to learn quickly, but she understands and agrees to focus on the fundamentals for now. Later, we find Merlin at the entrance of a deep, dark forest. She is clearly terrified but forces herself to be brave to prove herself. Merlin plans to kill one of the monsters inside the forest to show she is truly worthy of being the best student of the Lightning Emperor. That way, she can take over teaching the other kids, allowing Eftel to enjoy his retirement. She knows he would never ask her to do this, but she wants to help him in any way she can. Merlin's heart is in the right place, but her common sense is lacking. Not 10 minutes later, she is running for her life, trying to escape the forest after encountering a wolf monster. None of her level 4 magic works on it. Every spell she casts either misses or has no effect, and the wolf keeps charging at her. Realizing she cannot outrun it, she decides to take a risk and attempt some level 6 magic, even though she has barely practiced it. Merlin begins the chant for the spell. Though the wolf is still rushing at her, she stays focused and completes the spell, launching a massive thunderbolt at the wolf. She feels immense relief upon completing the spell, convinced she has defeated the wolf. To her horror, the wolf crashes through the blast without a scratch and knocks her to the ground. It then walks toward her, ready to attack, but just as it is about to eat her, a proper bolt of lightning strikes it down. Merlin is overjoyed to hear the crackle of lightning, knowing Eftel has come to save her. However, that joy quickly turns to fear when she sees how angry he is because he had warned her not to enter the forest. She shrinks back, filled with guilt, and apologizes for her foolishness. Eftel lectures Merlin on the importance of not rushing. He explains that power that isn't perfected cannot be called true power. He reminds her that even the most powerful magic is useless if the caster doesn't understand it. While he is speaking, the wolf monster suddenly rises behind him. But Eftel doesn't even turn to face it. Instead, he casually tells it not to interrupt while he is teaching his student a lesson and then uses some level 10 magic, incinerating the wolf in an instant. A little later, Eftel takes Merlin back home. She still can't believe how amazing and inspiring he looked using that level 10 spell. But he tells her to hurry and go to bed because she has had a long day. Merlin agrees and turns to get ready for bed. Suddenly, Eftel falls to his knees and starts spitting up blood. Merlin rushes to his side, worried about him. Eftel apologizes for allowing her to see him like this because he knows she looks up to him. However, Merlin reveals that she already knew about his sickness. She noticed it a while ago, which is why she worked hard to become his successor. She didn't want him to strain himself so much. Eftel feels ashamed that his condition drove her to pursue power recklessly, but he tells her he doesn't have much time left. He can't afford to waste a single minute resting. Merlin struggles to understand why Eftel insists on working despite his illness. Eftel explains he wants to be the one to teach the next generation of mages like her and the other kids. There was a time when he wanted to be the strongest mage of all time, but he has accepted that this will never happen. Now, he focuses on nurturing the next generation. Merlin doesn't get what he means, as he is clearly very strong. Eftel knows he is more powerful than most mages, but he has no chance against the other emperors, who are younger, stronger, and more talented. The next morning, one of Eftel's students knocks on his door with some good news. The Flame Emperor just published research on how to accurately determine a mage's magical talent. Eftel is shocked and grabs the paper to read it. The research paper provides a clear method for testing a mage's aptitude. Eftel is impressed by the Flame Emperor's groundbreaking discovery. He wants to try it out, so he calls everyone to gather. Later, everyone meets in the lab for the aptitude test. After preparing all the required materials, Eftel decides to check Merlin's aptitude first. He places 4 strands of her hair into 4 different test tubes. After a short time, they all change color, with the blue and green test tubes glowing especially brightly. This bright glow indicates that Merlin has S-rank talent in both water and wind magic, which everyone agrees suits her talent. The dull red and brown vials show that she has B and C-rank talent in earth and fire magic. While everyone talks about how cool this is, Eftel realizes the test is 100% accurate. It perfectly matches everything he observed in Merlin's training since she was a baby. Currently, mages discover their aptitude by practicing all forms of magic until 1 or 2 forms surpass the rest. With this new method, it should be possible to assess a mage's talent from birth, allowing training to be optimized for greater strength. Since the test seems genuine, Eftel decides to try it next. At first, Merlin doesn't see the point since they already know he is the Thunder Emperor, but Eftel wants to know if he ever truly had what it takes to be the greatest. Over the years, he has had to work much harder than everyone else just to keep up. After the test, Eftel discovers the reason for his struggles. He has absolutely no magical talent. He is left in shock because the clear vials mean there is no magical ability in his body. At first, Eftel rejects the result, convinced he made a mistake in the testing process. But no matter how many times he tries, the results stay the same. He must come to terms with the painful truth: he never reached the heights of the other emperors, not because he didn't try hard enough, but because the spirits had completely forsaken him. The sense of betrayal is so profound that he suffers a heart attack and falls to the ground. Some time later, Eftel has become bedridden as his condition worsens. In his final moments, he curses how unfair his life was. He kept hoping and believing that hard work would allow him to become the greatest mage of all time, but he realizes that his dream was doomed from the start. Shortly after, Eftel dies. Upon his death, his second reincarnation skill activates, bringing him to the goddess of reincarnation. He had forgotten about that skill since he was first reincarnated over 50 years ago, and now he feels silly for crying on his deathbed just moments ago. The goddess welcomes Eftel back, mentioning that a long time has passed since they last met. She is impressed with how far he got in this life despite having no magical talent. Now, it's time for Eftel's second reincarnation. The goddess offers him a cheap 2x growth skill to avoid bottlenecks next time, but Eftel declines. He believes he already has all the magical knowledge he needs to reach heights he couldn't in his past life. The goddess expected this kind of answer from him, and since he is ready, she reincarnates him into his new life. The next time Eftel opens his eyes, he finds himself in the body of a young boy living with his mother in the countryside. His life here is pretty normal, but with the memories of his past life now recalled, he sneaks off to the shed at his earliest chance to try out the aptitude appraisal method the Fire Emperor developed. He hopes that in this life, he might finally have good magical aptitudes to surpass his former self. To his disappointment, he finds he has 0 talent again. He's starting to regret turning down the cheat skill the goddess offered him. Being talentless yet again, he fears he will hit a bottleneck after learning 10th level magic just like in his last life. As he despaired over his mediocre fate, he suddenly sees a dragon flying overhead, heading straight for the city. A group of knights tries to stop the dragon, and Eftel runs after them to help. Then he realizes he is still a 4-year-old. He could have taken the dragon down easily at his peak, but in this toddler body, he can't cast his original 10th level magic. Just as he thinks about his spell, his body reacts, and the spell he developed over his past life is accidentally cast, striking the dragon down in one hit. The knights gather around the fallen dragon, confused about how it was taken down. Eftel is just as confused since he never expected to retain the skills he gained at his peak in his new body. 3 years have passed since Eftel reincarnated into this body, and through studying, he has figured out that he is indeed still in the same world as before, but it is 400 years in the future from Eftel's past life. As for his current family, aside from his mother, he also technically has a father, but he has never seen him before. His father's name is apparently Duke Alcott, and he happens to be one of Eftel's descendants, so he was hoping he would get to meet him, but he hasn't had any such luck. His mother is one of Alcott's many mistresses, but she has no magical talent, and the other mistresses don't like her, since they think someone with no magical aptitude has no place in a mage family, so they sent her to live out in the middle of nowhere, and that essentially means that Eftel isn't recognized as a member of the family either. Fraser notices Eftel looking sad, so he apologizes for how he is being treated, and he says he would like to convince Alcott to change his mind, but so far, it hasn't been easy. Fraser treats Eftel as though he were his little brother, but in reality, Fraser is only Eftel's half-brother since Fraser is actually the second son of Alcott's legitimate wife. He took pity on Eftel and his mother's situation and has been helping them out here and there for a while now, so Eftel has taken a liking to him and thinks Fraser is a good man. Fraser already dropped off some money to help them get by for the month, but he asks them if there's anything else they need before he leaves, and Eftel's mom thanks him for the consideration, but she says he has already done more than enough for them. This isn't exactly the ideal family situation for Eftel, but to be honest, he doesn't really care as long as he can keep studying magic. Fraser decides to stay for some tea with Eftel and his mom, and while he's there, he asks Eftel what he hopes to accomplish in the future, since he noticed that Eftel has been studying a lot lately. Eftel perks up when Fraser asks that question, so he's about to tell him that he wants to dedicate his life to studying magic, but his mom covers his mouth and tells Fraser that since Eftel has no magical aptitude like her, she was hoping Fraser would help him enroll in military school. Fraser seems delighted by the idea since he too went to military school and graduated top of his class in swordsmanship, so he thinks it will be perfect for Eftel. In fact, since he has some free time right now, he asks Eftel if he would like to go around back and practice some swordsmanship in the meantime, and before Eftel gets the chance to respond, his mom says she'd love that. A little while later, Eftel is out in the backyard with Fraser, and Fraser is running him through some basic swordsmanship drills. Eftel is going along with it for now since he can see how excited Fraser is that he's going to military school like him, and he is sure part of it is because Fraser is being considerate of Eftel's lack of magical talent, but Eftel is sure of what he wants, so he tells Fraser he wants to study magic. Fraser looks at Eftel with pity in his eyes because he thinks he's just being delusional, and he tries to explain to him that there's no shame in accepting that there are some things you just aren't good at, but Eftel insists that he wants to go to the Magic Academy no matter what, so Fraser proposes a challenge. He tells Eftel he is going to cast a spell, and if Eftel manages to replicate it, he will be allowed to attend the Magic Academy. Eftel is excited since this seems like an easy test to him, but internally, Fraser is feeling guilty about doing something so cruel to Eftel because he believes there's no way Eftel could ever cast magic, so this is his way of getting Eftel to realize that there's no way he can study magic without any magical aptitude. Fraser begins casting a wind spell, but to Eftel's confusion, he sees Fraser using a chant and doing some weird dance to cast the spell. By the time Fraser is done, he casts a wind slash that cleaves a tree right down the trunk, and he is impressed with himself because casting a spell like that takes a lot of effort. He assumed Eftel would be left in awe after seeing his performance, but Eftel doesn't seem impressed at all. He then proceeds to wave his hand and cast a wind spell of his own. Only Eftel's spell is much stronger than Fraser's and casually clears a large section of the forest. For a second, Eftel is worried he messed up because Fraser asked him to replicate the spell he cast, and while Fraser's spell was only level 2, Eftel got carried away and made his spell level 4. Fraser is left absolutely speechless when he hears that what Eftel just used was level 4 magic because, in this day and age, level 4 spells are seen as advanced magic, and he doesn't understand how a 7-year-old like Eftel was able to learn something like that. Eftel is a little confused by what Fraser just said because he clearly remembers level 4 magic being classified as low-level magic back in his day, and he can still go all the way up to level 10, so there must be something wrong here. Hearing Eftel say he can use level 10 magic is too much for Fraser's brain to process, so he ends up passing out, and judging by his reaction, Eftel is starting to wonder what this era's magic is really like. He takes Fraser up to his room so he can rest, and while he's there, he starts reading some books to figure out where this world stands in terms of magic. It turns out that, for some unknown reason, magic has severely declined over the past 400 years, to the point that something as basic as incantationless spell casting is basically a lost art. A few moments later, Fraser wakes up, and he's still freaking out about Eftel being able to use such strong magic, but Eftel manages to gaslight him into thinking that when he cast his spells, he destroyed the tree and accidentally had a piece of wood fly into his head out of nowhere and knock him out, so everything he thought he saw must have been a hallucination. The reason Eftel went through all the trouble of convincing Fraser that he must have been hallucinating is that if the magic of this world really is of such a low level, he would cause a national incident if he were to reveal his power. So he decides to keep it hidden for now and study magic in secret, while pretending to agree to go to military school. Or at least, that was the plan at first, but during training, Eftel kept getting beaten by Fraser so many times that it infuriated him, and he began genuinely wanting to improve at swordsmanship just so he could get back at Fraser. By the age of 10, Eftel had fully embraced swordsmanship, and his skills had gotten to the point that he could now dice up a log midair with nothing but a wooden sword. Sure, magic is cool, but using a sword is pretty fun too, and now that he thinks about it, becoming a magic swordsman is an option, so he can just train both at the same time. A little while later, Fraser shows up looking for Eftel because it's time for their usual training session, and Eftel says he will be right there. But it turns out that Fraser happened to have something special planned for today's training session. He says he brought a guest instructor along today, and as he says this, Eftel notices that it got really dark around him all of a sudden. He then turns around to find an absolute mountain of a man standing behind him, and he is startled at first because he wasn't expecting to see someone like him. But Fraser introduces him as Moria and explains to Eftel that he is going to be his special sword instructor. Moria is the retired captain of the Knights, so he is incredibly skilled with a sword, and he wants to go up against Eftel since Fraser has been bragging about him nonstop. He tells Eftel to attack him any way he wants, and he even turns his back to make it easy for him. But Eftel can tell that there isn't a single opening on Moria, so he doesn't dare to move. Moria gets bored of waiting for Eftel to make the first move, so he decides to strike first, and Eftel just barely manages to evade the strike. But Moria isn't impressed so far because any novice swordsman could have done that. Eftel knows there's no way he's going to be able to contend with someone like Moria in terms of strength with his current body, so he casts physical enhancement on himself. And Moria is actually impressed to see him do this, because it's an advanced skill for someone as young as him. This is one of the reasons Fraser thought Eftel was so special, because despite the fact that, as far as Fraser knows, Eftel is incapable of using magic, he noticed that Eftel has quite a bit of mana in his body, and he can control it just as well as any mage can, which is why he is able to use physical enhancement so effortlessly. Eftel may be struggling against Moria right now, but in truth, if he wanted to, he could have taken Moria out immediately by using magic, but he's trying to his magic a secret, and besides, he doesn't want to win like that, he wants to win through the merit of his martial arts skills. He charges back and against Moria, but Moria counters with a heavy slash, and though Eftel manages to block it, he is still being pushed down under the weight of the slash. Moria thinks this is checkmate since, even with the physical enhancement, Eftel isn't strong enough to overpower him in a head-on confrontation, but to his surprise, mid-clash, Eftel suddenly swings his sword to the side, causing Moria to slip forward, and Eftel then proceeds to use Moria's momentum against him to judo throw him to the ground. Moria can hardly believe what just happened, but he is man enough to admit when he lost fair and square, so he congratulates Eftel on his victory and tells him he passed the test. Eftel doesn't know what he's talking about since he thought this was just a regular friendly sparring match, but Fraser explains that he actually brought Moria here to test him, because Moria is the headmaster of the military school, and since Eftel managed to beat him, he has earned himself guaranteed admission. That said, he's going to have to wait until he turns 15 to attend. Some time goes by, and Fraser is over at Eftel's house again when a big thunderstorm rolls in. He thinks it looks pretty bad out there, so he asks Eftel's mom where Eftel is, and she tells him that Eftel is still out there training, and that he probably isn't going to return since he never comes back early, even when the weather is bad like this. Meanwhile, on Eftel's end, he is out in the forest practicing his level 10 spells, and he is a little frustrated since he is a little slower in terms of casting time than he'd like to be, so he still has a lot of work ahead of him. And he loves rainy days like this because it gives him the opportunity to train his magic without drawing suspicion, since everyone will just assume it was a regular thunderbolt. However, he failed to account for the possibility that someone might come looking for him because a moment later, Fraser comes running up to him, and he is terrified because he just saw that terrifying bolt of lightning strike near Eftel. He asks him if he's okay, and Eftel says he is fine, but Fraser begins lecturing him on how important it is to make sure he doesn't get hurt because he will be enrolling in the military school next year. Hearing Fraser talk about military school reminds Eftel that he doesn't have much time left, and though he hasn't discussed this with his mom or Fraser, he has decided that he can't go to military school. He understands that with magic aptitude tests being common, it will be hard for him to get into the magic academy, but he still wants to give it a try. But he doesn't know how to explain that to Fraser and his mom, so he has decided to leave home right before he's set to join the military school. But just as he was thinking this, Fraser suddenly said he had some good news for Eftel because, after hearing of how skilled Eftel was with a sword, his father finally decided that he wants to see him. Eftel personally didn't really want to meet his father at this point, since he had already been ignored for 14 years, so whatever relationship he had hoped to cultivate was already dead. But he can see how happy his mom and Fraser are about it, and he doesn't want to make them sad, so he agrees to the meeting. However, he soon comes to regret that decision because he finds out that his father is an absolute jerk. He never once stopped thinking of Eftel as a failure, and the only reason he called him here was to tell him that he will no longer be paying any child support for Eftel since he got a scholarship to the military school. And while he's here, he also asks one of his other sons to have a sparring match with Eftel, intending to have him injured just because he doesn't like him.